gondola cabins both times.
If there's any silver lining to this, we know two things. One, Squamish is an amazing place that really supports its town and its community, and our industry is a pretty incredible industry that really comes out when you need them.
The company has doubled a reward offered to anyone who's able to help police catch the suspect. It's willing to pay up to $500,000 for information that leads to an arrest and conviction. Josh Grant, CBC News, Vancouver.
Public schools in BC are set to close next Monday to commemorate the Queen's funeral. The last-minute change has left many families scrambling, and as Joel Ballard reports, angry parents say shutting schools sends the wrong message.
Firma Ron and her husband both work full-time jobs, so the closing of schools next Monday was a curveball.
It means that I have to take the day off of work.
Families scrambling for childcare, calling up babysitting favors with loved ones.
I think that there is a lot of anger, and I don't think that parents were consulted in terms of this decision because it was made so fast.
Not only that, but it's another day of missed education.
Learning loss is a real issue this year, more than any other year.
In September alone, Kana says there are already 2 holidays and a Pro D Day, and most students in Vancouver were only just assigned to their classrooms. He says there needs to be changes at the Ministry of Education so that the system can better respond to the unexpected.
It should be resilient to provide for childcare when there is a risk or an emergency or a disaster or anything, a state funeral, a day of mourning, whatever comes at us as a surprise, our systems should be geared up so that we can deal with it.
While public schools are closed, it's up to individual private schools to decide how to proceed. Pear Tree School in Vancouver will remain open. For the administrators, it came down to an ethical dilemma.
How can we move towards decolonizing our school, our curriculum, while celebrating that at the same time?
Especially considering the timing. September 30th marks the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, which recognizes the legacy of the Canadian Indian residential school system.
It seems very contradictory, and it also seems very hypocritical to not model that to our students, that on one hand, we are recognizing a monarchy that really had significant damage on our First Peoples here in Canada.
Back in Burnaby, Ron says next Monday could have been a chance for deeper understanding.
It would have created an opportunity for kids to explore the monarchy and the history of colonization.
Come Monday, all public post-secondary schools will also be closed. Joel Ballard, CBC News, Vancouver.
A man is dead after a shooting on Tuesday night in Burnaby. The incident took place shortly after 11 p.m. Burnaby RCMP responded to reports of shots fired along the 4700 block of Hastings Street. There, they found a man who had been shot dead. Shortly after, there were reports of a burnt vehicle found on the 8200 block of Burn Lake Drive. The Integrated Homicide Investigation Team has taken over the investigation. They're asking anyone with any dashcam video to come forward. 2 executives associated with Vancouver's Trevally Mining Corporation have been found guilty of involuntary manslaughter after the company's West African mine flooded, killing 8 people. Hayne Fry and Daryl Christensen, who are both South African, received suspended sentences of 24 months and 12 months, respectively, for their parts in the incident which happened this spring. Workers were trapped more than 500 meters below the surface of the mine located in Burkina Faso after heavy rain caused flash flooding. 8 workers were unable to get to an underground refuge chamber and died. Pumping equipment had to be imported from other countries, including Ghana and South Africa, prompting questions about the company's preparedness. Trevally declined an interview with CBC News. Parents of children with support needs are raising concerns over changes to provincial funding and programs.
If we as a society are going to meet the call of Article 23 in the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, which speaks to the rights of all children and youth with special needs to access care and support and live a life of dignity, belonging, and connection, then the current systems needs to be transformed.
The new provincial plans are moving away from funding individual support in favor of community settings. Critics say that takes choice away from families. They're raising their concerns to the Ministry of Children and Family Development and the rollout of so-called family connection centres. They say a different path forward is needed to meet the needs of all children and families. The province has committed $62 million for Abbotsford to build a new well and water treatment system after last winter's devastating floods.
We came perilously close to running out of water. Our system was actually down for 8 weeks. And this will allow our city to have consistent, reliable, quality water in the years ahead.
85% of the city's water supply was knocked out after record-breaking rainfall flooded the Sumas Prairie. The province says the new system will ensure a reliable, resilient water service in response to growing climate-related threats. Well, we are a month and a day away from municipal elections across the province. But this week, most local leaders are off the campaign trail and in Whistler. Our Justin McElroy explains why and if there's any point to what they're doing there.
This is the biggest event in local government all year. It's the Union of BC Municipalities Conference, and all week mayors and councillors are having meetings to talk about things that look nothing like this. Homelessness, drug addiction, affordable housing, healthcare shortages, these are real issues in communities big and small, and many people here are worried that things are going to get worse.
This is a health crisis, but we're also going to be turning this into what might be a society crisis if we don't properly plan. How will this initiative to legalize small amounts of hard drugs control and reduce the related crime that's going on in our communities?
And you might ask what a bunch of politicians milling about in Whistler is going to do to solve any of this. But some people have come this week with presentations and messages to their fellow politicians.
What is happening and has been happening, it's not working, right? So we have to not be afraid to try to see what will work.
That's Michelle Staples, the mayor of Duncan. It's a town of 5,000 people, but it's facing the same challenges as everywhere else. So it's trying something else. Over the last 2 years, Duncan created a tiny home village, a few dozen structures with showers and support surfaces. There's a lookout program that is half village residents, half peers from the community that does street cleanups. Crime is down, and a majority of residents are now employed or actively looking for it. And it's getting noticed.
We know that a lot of people in our community, specifically the most vulnerable people in our community, just don't fit into, put them in an apartment, put them into supportive housing. So this is a transitionary option that we think can have a real impact.
That's Sherry Minions, mayor of Port Alberni. They're in the process of building their own tiny village.
But the beauty of doing this, following successful other projects like Duncan's being implemented, is that we have a model and we've seen that how successful Duncan has been.
And you might say a couple of municipalities creating a few dozen homes won't accomplish much. But here is a chart. It shows the number of emergency housing units in every municipality in Metro Vancouver. And here is the city of Vancouver. In the most populated region of the province, it has just been one municipality taking the overwhelming load for housing the most vulnerable for decades, and we can see the results. Now, not every municipality has to be Duncan. Not every municipality has to act like Duncan and do the same strategies. But if every municipality took ownership over the situation like Duncan has, we might not be where we are today.
The Battleship Mountain Fire in northern BC has grown to nearly 300 square kilometers. Thick smoke is posing major challenges for fire crews, while air quality worsens across the region. As John Hernandez reports, evacuees there are trying to stay strong, waiting and hoping.
Well, I'm trying to stay calm, but it's not working very well. It seems like every time I turn around, something else is wrong.
Diana June and her dog Luna are trying to adapt to life in a hotel. They fled Hudson's Hope last week, where a raging wildfire has spread to within 8 kilometers.
I've lived in Hudson's Hope for almost 30 years. It's an amazing community, and I love it very much, and I want to live there. And I want my son and his little family to live there too.
The Battleship Mountain fire is getting bigger. It grew by a square kilometer over the past day, now sitting at nearly 300 square kilometers, or nearly twice the size of Salt Spring Island. Fortunately for residents, an infrared scan overnight found barriers protecting the town and a major dam nearby are holding.
Morale is staying high. Crews are continuing to work and achieve objectives.
But hot weather and, in particular, thick smoke are still big challenges. Crews were socked in Tuesday.
When we have visibility issues, we just need to make sure that we're operating as safe as possible. Sometimes it's too unsafe for helicopters to fly in the area.
Air quality in the region is currently the worst in the province, smoke heavily blanketing Fort St. John.
Early in the morning, it really stinks and it's hard to breathe.
I just don't stay out too long. As soon as your kind of mouth gets dry, itchy, you just go inside.
Conditions seemingly getting worse, leaving some evacuated families wondering what it will mean for their kids in school.
They're here and all of their friends are here. And they're seeing their friends all over the place and they're doing fun things. For myself, every day that goes by, I'm like, okay, this is one more day that we can't get a start on the curriculum.
Evacuation orders are in place until at least Sunday, with many hoping they'll be able to return soon after.
Hope, yeah. Everybody who prays, say your prayers, Anybody who wants to do a rain dance, go for it.
Much needed rain that could arrive before the end of the week. John Hernandez, CBC News, Fort St. John.
Meanwhile, a smoke advisory has been lifted for Metro Vancouver, but the haze will remain just a little bit longer, particularly in parts of the Fraser Valley. Wildfires across the Cascadia region are sending fine particulate matter towards Chilliwack, Agassiz, and Hope. CBC's Yasmin Gandam now on when residents might expect to breathe easier.
A thick gray haze continues to blanket much of the lower mainland. Air quality is not expected to improve until the weather changes. And Environment Canada says conditions are drier and warmer than usual for September.
It's just a matter of when the fires are burning and the weather patterns being, set up so that they can bring that smoke out over us. And as I mentioned, some of these fires are very close to home. We, even looking out towards Hope. So the smoke doesn't have that far to come.
The poor air quality can also have poor health outcomes, both physically and mentally.
Sluggish, maybe headaches, just kind of feeling malaise. And that can, while for the average person is not life-threatening, that can still have an impact. It makes it harder to work. It makes it harder to concentrate. It makes it, and mental health can suffer. Even just the view of the haze can make some people less optimistic.
Metro Vancouver officials are warning people to stay indoors whenever possible, especially those who are immunocompromised, to avoid smoke inhalation. Now, BC wildfire officials do say that they expect for the air quality to improve in the coming days.
However, we do have the weather playing to our advantage for till about Sunday. It might start drying out again on Sunday, so that's going to be very helpful. So we definitely are going to want to capitalize on that.
Zandberg says the Flood Falls Trail in Hope does have very steep terrain, which poses a challenge to get around. But he is optimistic the rain will help in their fire efforts. That rain can be expected starting Thursday. Yasmin Gandam, CBC News, Vancouver.
And meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe joins us now. So, Joe, feels like a bit of a change of the winds, bringing some cleaner air to the region, hopefully soon, I hope.
Yeah, a lot hanging on this cold front, Leanne, tracking through the province tomorrow and really Friday for southern BC. It's not a soaking rain, but we'll take it. And as we heard, hopefully that'll definitely make an impact in some of the fires across the province. Let me start you off with that widespread special weather statement. As you mentioned, Leanne, we have seen it now drop just a couple of hours ago for Metro Vancouver. We have seen a little bit of mixing, shift in winds as that cold front begins to approach for parts of the south coast. However, it is still in place for Howe Sound, parts of the eastern sections of Vancouver Island, up the Sunshine Coast, and the Fraser Valley from Chilliwack eastward, still under that air quality statement. And you can see it extending all the way across the border as well. So this smoke is thick. It's entrenched in the valleys, but you can see just getting that dropped for Metro Vancouver. That's not to say we still won't see some hazy skies over the next 24 hours, but things are changing. First of all, this is the second day of lightning strikes in the interior. This is a live look at the radar and the lightning strikes, not quite as widespread as yesterday. This may be starting new fires, and sometimes it takes us a couple of days to realize where those new fire starts are if they smolder a bit with the rain. But the next system to move in, which is already bringing rain, Leanne, to central coastal sections, will certainly feel good. So I'll time that out. I'll tell you just how much rain we can expect here in Vancouver coming up.
Okay, thanks, Jo. I've never been so grateful for rain.
Same, no problem.
For 4 years, a group of Special Fisheries and Oceans Canada officers have been patrolling the Salish Sea to keep humans and whales apart. Our Liam Britton got an inside look at the work by the Whale Protection Unit and spoke with their critics.
It's not the typical law enforcement beat. Here it means motoring across the Salish Sea, looking for dangers to whales, including endangered southern resident killer whales.
We want to provide them as much protection as possible. We are in their environment, and so we are encroaching onto their space and what they do naturally. And, all they want to do is feed and forage and, survive.
The Whale Protection Unit, based in the Lower Mainland in Victoria, patrols for people disturbing whales by getting too close. There are laws in place to mandate distances. For southern residents, that means no going within 400 meters.
And when boats get too close, that disturbs their behavior, and it hinders them from foraging and communicating with each other. The biggest thing we want to avoid as well is any vessel strikes or propeller strikes. Those are extremely damaging to the whales.
The team spent Tuesday cruising between the Gulf Islands looking for groups of boats clustered together, which could be boaters trying to catch a glimpse of the creatures, but then maybe getting too close. But the whales made few appearances, so no potential misbehavior was seen this time. But the unit did have to act. 2 pleasure boats cruised through a critical habitat area for whales where boats are mostly banned. The couple on board this one seemed unaware of the rules. They quickly left the sanctuary zone after being informed of the violation. The Pacific Whale Watching Association, in a statement to CBC, said law enforcement, not just the Whale Protection Unit, is only at 3% of whale sightings attended by whale watching companies. Executive Director Aaron Gless says when law enforcement is there, it sometimes feels as if a disproportionate amount of effort goes toward monitoring professional whale watch vessels when evidence shows that other vessels pose a far greater threat to whales. That includes noise from large ships like ferries and tankers and distance violations by recreational boaters. Captain Scott Hampkin wants consequences for poorly operated recreational craft like rental boats and jet skis.
They're totally oblivious, and they'll come right in. They'll come in front of the whale watch boats. They'll come in front of the whales. They'll approach them from behind or in front. And it's just, we see this and we're so frustrated that we're not able to do anything.
Chung says the unit aims to strike a balance between enforcement and education, and more people are getting the message. He believes that's leading to less conflict and smoother waters. Liam Britton, CBC News, Richmond.
In just a week, Ukraine has put Russian troops on the run, and now cracks are appearing in the political world of Moscow. How it all went so wrong so quickly, that's next. And thanks for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream. In BC, there's been a great many whale sightings as of late, but if you're more of a shark person, some are, you could try heading over to Nova Scotia. Great whites are there, but be careful not to get mauled, though, because as David Pate tells us, they chomp away at any other animals in the water, including other sharks.
Just kind of try to straighten his tail. This 2-meter-long blue shark was caught by Dalhousie scientists who wanted to tag it. Then they noticed a big bite mark.
When this shark came up onto the deck, it became very apparent almost immediately that there was a big wound on the back.
Bangley asked marine biologist and shark expert Chris Harvey-Clark to examine the wound.
It had absolutely classic characteristic bites of a large white shark on it. So I was able to do accurate measurements of that shark bite down to about 1 millimeter, and got a shark that was somewhere between 4.0 and 4.4 meters in length. So it was a good sized shark. You wouldn't want to bump into the shark on a dark night, put it that way.
There's a perception that we're seeing more sharks in our waters thanks to tagging programs and shark tracker apps. But no one really knows how many are out there, which is why biologists head out on boats to catch and tag them.
We don't know when they mature and how old they get. We don't know for a lot of species where they mature, when they mature, how many offspring they get. So it's kind of, we are at the beginning of a lot of those questions.
The bite on the captured blue shark was likely only a few hours old, but biologist Charles Bangley says sharks are remarkably resilient.
They heal from wounds like that very, very quickly. I would say by this time next year, you would have some nice scarring on that shark from that bite, but it would not be anywhere near those big open wounds that you saw in the photograph.
Resilient or not, the wounded shark was rejected for the tagging program. The researchers felt it had gone through enough. It was dropped back into the ocean. David Pate, CBC News, Halifax.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky visited troops in the newly recaptured areas near the city of Kharkiv, driving home Ukraine's sudden and dramatic advance in the country's northeast. As Terence McKenna shows us, the collapse of Russian forces there has strained the official Kremlin narrative on the war to the breaking point.
This is the town of Balaklia in eastern Ukraine that has been under Russian occupation for the last 7 months, just retaken by the Ukraine armed forces, who raise the Ukraine flag and play the national anthem. The Ukrainian forces have been liberating one town after another in their counter-offensive march. They are often greeted by ecstatic residents. They are also capturing a huge amount of Russian weapons, shells, and scores of tanks. Residents say the Russians often fled in panic as the Ukrainians advanced. Some were not quite fast enough and were captured. Former Ukrainian Defense Minister Andriy Zagorodnyuk.
We have lots of recordings that they are dropping everything and just running. They take lots of stolen cars, like just regular citizens' cars, and just drive in them to Russia. They have dropped lots of their equipment. They left like enormous amount of ammunition, which of course we're going to use.
Maria Mezentseva represents Kharkiv in the Ukrainian parliament.
Russian soldiers were looting, raping, trying to get away with it. Now we can definitely say Russian army is number 2 in the world, not in terms of their preferences over someone else or their tactics or their weapons, but they're number 2 in running away in sprint from Ukrainian army, because they are trying to escape as much as they can.
At the beginning of the invasion, Russian troops pushed in around Kharkiv, but never succeeded in taking Ukraine's second largest city. Now, in a lightning maneuver, the Ukraine troops have pushed back, reportedly reclaiming 8,000 square kilometers of territory in a matter of days. The Russian Defense Ministry has tried to claim this was a pre-planned tactical withdrawal, that they were not pushed out.
You don't strategically leave the area and then leave all your stuff there. You don't leave tens of tanks and thousands of munition rounds and so on and so on, if this is a planned movement. So obviously it doesn't make sense.
A number of prominent pro-Putin voices in Russia aren't buying the pre-planned tactical withdrawal story either. Putin was criticized for opening a big new Ferris wheel in Moscow on Saturday as his troops were in retreat, suggesting he was living in denial. Even the Chechen leader Ramzan Kadyrov, a Putin acolyte, said he would have to tell Russian military and political leaders what was really happening. On his Russian TV propaganda show, Putin mouthpiece Vladimir Solovyov acknowledged things were going badly and said that Putin would have to hit Ukraine with much greater force.
I don't know what's the awareness of Mr. Solovyov or whoever else about the actual capabilities, but if he knows the truth, he would be quite disappointed. All intelligence is more or less on the same page about Russia right now, military intelligence. We have closest partners like US, UK, Canada, and other countries who help us. They cannot strike back. They don't have any serious weapons, that something which they didn't use. Nuclear chances are extremely low because that's not the time when you use them.
The Russians have struck back in anger by lobbing more rockets into residential areas of Kharkiv. Some Ukrainians compare them to the sort of occupiers who, if evicted from your building, shoot the puppy on the way out. While many fear what Putin is capable of if he is backed into a corner, if things are not going his way, some Ukrainians say they are not.
We stopped fearing him long time ago. We know that he wakes up, seems like at least these days, and goes to sleep thinking about how he's going to destroy Ukraine, but he fails. And he will be failing this in the future.
Advancing Ukrainian troops today reached towns on the Russian border and were ripping down billboards that claimed the occupied land was now part of Russia. President Zelensky paid a surprise visit to the liberated city of Izium and spoke about the emotion of looking to the blue sky and again seeing the Ukrainian flag there.
I was in tears. As President Zelensky said recently, from the 24th of February, we have all become of one profession, which is Ukrainian, and with one mission, to survive. I want to say that the people in Kharkiv are, in the Kharkiv region as well, are one of the bravest in terms of those who serve in the military, in terms of every firefighter, every doctor, every teacher, every volunteer, every business person. It's just I'm crying on a daily basis just because I'm happy to be the part of it.
Some residents from the occupied areas say it was clear many young Russian troops did not want to be there, which could explain why they have been running away so quickly. Still, many here are waiting in dread for the Russian Empire to strike back. Terence McKenna, CBC News, Toronto.
The Queen's body has made her way from Scotland down to London. Mourners in the capital lining up for hours to pay their respects. We take you to England next.
Cellular telephones are becoming a standard part of life for many people across this country. But as their popularity grows, so do questions about their use, questions of privacy and security. Ian Hanama-Singh has that story.
Business is growing for the cellular phone companies in British Columbia, but so are questions about the security of these phones, questions prompted by the Bud Smith scandal. In July, the opposition NDP released tapes they had received of car phone conversations involving Attorney General Bud Smith. The contents of the tape led to the resignation of Smith and a hot political controversy. All of that has many cellular phone users worried about how secure their conversations are.
It really kind of worries me if the neighbors listening too.
And I think that it's made us far more aware when using the cellular phone that there is possibility of other people listening.
In fact, Smith didn't have a cellular phone, but a radio phone, a sort of advanced two-way radio which is fairly easy to listen in on with a simple scanner. By contrast, cellular phones are much more sophisticated. The companies say there are so many channels, it's difficult for someone to use a scanner to find and listen to a specific conversation. But companies warn cellular phone users should take care.
Well, the concern they should have is that if they're into a highly confidential conversation, it would be my advice, and in fact it's the advice in the Can't Tell Handbook, that they should use caution and discretion.
All of this has led to the question of legality. Whether it's a radio phone, a cellular, or even a cordless phone at home, is listening in on these conversations with a scanner against the law? In the criminal code, eavesdropping on phone conversations is prohibited if it's reasonable for the originator to expect it will not be intercepted. It's not spelled out if that applies to portable phone conversations. And the federal government says the issue is so unclear, it isn't sure what the answer is. The BC and Alberta governments looked at the issue in light of the Bud Smith affair and concluded that in some particular circumstances, intercepting these conversations might be illegal. That conclusion led the Deputy Attorney General of BC to issue this warning about cellular phone calls.
In the future, the interception and/or disclosure of such conversations may result in criminal prosecution.
But a senior member of the Attorney General's staff admitted the legality is not very clear.
The law in this area, as Mr. Hughes has pointed out, is at its frontier stage. And it's very difficult to predict what a court might say about two cellular phones, one person speaking to another.
Some legal experts say what's needed is a new law, one that's written with the current technology in mind. But unless that happens, or until there's a major case on the issue, it seems that the legality of intercepting portable phone conversations is still up in the air. Ian Hannamansing, CBC News, Vancouver.
The Queen is now lying in state at Westminster Hall in London. Mourners will be able to view her coffin and pay respects until her state funeral on Monday. Margaret Evans has more on today's ceremonies from London.
The great bones of Buckingham Palace framed the procession carrying Queen Elizabeth from her London home for the last time. Her coffin borne by horse-drawn gun carriage, followed by her children and grandchildren. The march of history down the Mall, slow but relentless. The drumbeat of the funeral march keeping time as guns sounded and bells tolled. Many of those watching say they weren't prepared for the emotions that came with it.
I'm a bit choked up. I can't really speak at the minute. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I didn't think it really hit me until I saw her crown on top of the coffin. I was a bit like, whoa,
yeah,
that's incredible.
Such a tiny coffin and then seeing that crown.
Yeah.
These women all met for the first time this morning. In the hours waiting for the procession to begin, friendships were formed.
People have been waiting here for hours and hours. In recent days, we've witnessed incredible scenes in Scotland as people there bid a fond and dignified farewell to the Queen. Now it repeats here.
There was gentle applause as the gun carriage passed along the route towards Westminster, for the Queen, but for the family following too. William and Harry, who walked behind their mother, Princess Diana's coffin 25 years ago, and their father, Charles, now bearing the sometimes lonely mantle of monarch.
I'm glad that they got that little opportunity yesterday, that window of being alone at Buckingham Palace. But yeah, they have to, it's a very public event, isn't it? And I feel as though Prince Charles still hasn't been able to hasn't been given the opportunity to mourn yet.
This phase of official mourning marks the start of the public's chance here in London to pay their respects to the Queen in person. The procession making its way to the Palace of Westminster, where she will lie in state for 4 days. Long lines began forming well before the procession left Buckingham Palace in the afternoon. The doors to Westminster Hall will remain open 24 hours a day. Margaret Evans, CBC News, London.
Experts say the overuse of antipsychotic drugs in Canada's long-term care homes has been a problem for years. Now, a CBC News investigation reveals it's once again on the rise. Jonathan Gatehouse introduces us to one family who sounded the alarm about antipsychotics.
This was a little book that we made for my father when he was in long-term care.
Laura Pinto's father, Bob, was admitted to a Windsor, Ontario nursing home in 2017 with dementia. After a series of bad falls, doctors put him on a cocktail of sedatives to ease his restlessness.
Most of it was antipsychotic medication for a person with no diagnosis of psychosis. He went from a person who had dementia to basically like a zombie, like he was in a non-responsive state most of the time.
So drugged up that when he was sent to hospital after one fall, staff needed to give him a shot of Narcan, commonly used to reverse an opioid overdose.
It's devastating to watch a person deteriorate like that.
Pinto's story is not unique. Newly obtained figures from the Canadian Institute for Health Information show potentially inappropriate use of antipsychotics spiked during COVID lockdowns, reversing a long downward trend. At 23.9%, this year's provisional numbers are the highest since 2016, meaning almost 1 in 4 long-term care residents are now receiving the drugs without a diagnosis of psychosis. Another cause for concern after 2 years of isolation and staffing woes, says this expert.
Across Canada in long-term care, there were just devastating effects for residents and for staff. So particularly for residents who have dementia, various antipsychotics have been shown to increase the risk for death, for stroke, for other cardiovascular events as well.
Melissa Miller litigates care home malpractice. She thinks Ottawa needs to step up and fulfill its 2020 promise to create binding national standards, something that would cover antipsychotics.
Provinces do not get a single dollar of federal funding unless they comply with the standards in the Canada Health Act. Full stop. We do not have a similar carrot and stick mechanism for long-term care.
Health Canada says it's been working collaboratively with the provinces to improve the quality of long-term care, and that the new national standards will be finalized in the coming months. Something that can't happen soon enough for the families of the 25,000 to 30,000 care home residents who appear to be receiving these drugs inappropriately. Jonathan Gatehouse, CBC News, Toronto.
University and college students are among those who have made the return to in-person learning after COVID-19 restrictions. In addition to new variants, there's another virus, monkeypox, that's been spreading around the world in recent months. CBC's Lauren Pelly takes a closer look at how Canadian campuses are responding.
Canadian campuses are bustling again after more than 2 years of COVID-19 disruptions. And this fall, schools are watching out for another pathogen too.
Perhaps students will be asking more questions about monkeypox as it is a new communicable disease. Do you guys want to play bingo?
The concern comes after cases of monkeypox began spreading globally through sexual networks, largely impacting men who have sex with men.
On university campuses across the world, that's a setting where sexual activity can commonly happen.
This Toronto physician who has treated some of the city's monkeypox patients says schools need to educate students.
Doing so in a way that's not stigmatizing and avoids any sense of shame associated with sexual activity, I think is really, really paramount.
CBC News asked more than a dozen Canadian schools about their plans to keep students safe if cases do pop up on campuses. Many told us they have educational resources available, while others are offering monkeypox vaccines. At least one university also has isolation rooms available for students who catch any contagious disease.
And then we also provide them with all the necessities that they may need, food, bedding, all those other things that they might need in that isolation period.
Campus precautions are being put in place as the overall number of monkeypox cases in Canada is trending down from a summer peak. Still, health officials are urging caution.
A downward trend can be the most dangerous time if it opens the door to complacency.
We're continuing with...
But this advocate says students shouldn't panic either.
And I think it'll be important for universities to strike a balance, ensuring that the right information is reaching the folks who need to hear it, and not, sparking unfounded concerns or anxieties among the broader student population.
A population that seems ready to have a more normal school year. Lauren Pelly, CBC News, Toronto.
A technological shift on the roads, why one of the world's largest auto shows is going electric. That's next. And it is 6:41 p.m. A gorgeous sunset out in Tofino there. People walking their dogs. Must be nice. Clear skies for now, but the rain, it's a-coming. Johanna has a look at the Denver forecast. But how much of that stuff are we going to get, and will it help those wildfires? That's next.
My name is Callum Donovan Gruich. I'm 12 years old and I make figurative sculptures. I've always loved art, especially sculpture. I started making things when I was about 2 years old. I made sculptures out of fabric, things like wool. I started experimenting with making my own clay out of toilet paper, drywall compound, mineral oil, and glue, and that worked pretty well. I find it more interesting to put a bunch of different materials together. So I had the idea to make these sculptures out of lots of materials. I had to figure out how to make them because I had never seen anything like this before. After a while, they evolved into what I make now. Sometimes I just get a picture in my head and then I sculpt it. Often though, I find some piece of metal or something first, and that inspires me. Then the sculpture comes from that. I like to use a lot of found objects. Whenever I go outside, I'm always scavenging for bits of metal. I'm always looking on the ground for them. People often ask me what certain sculptures mean, but I don't like to talk about meaning. I want people to decide what they think it means instead of me telling them. I prefer to express myself through art rather than through speaking. I know some people find my work dark and scary, but I don't at all. I like things that look kind of old-fashioned. When I grow up, I want to go to art school and be a professional sculptor and have a sanctuary for neglected animals.
And welcome back. A rare bird has residents in the Kootenays raving about its appearance. This is a white crow. Seen near Castlegar on Monday, it's like your usual crow, but almost completely white. Lisa Shabbat noticed something white fluttering among a group of black crows in her neighborhood when she snapped this photo. The bird isn't an albino crow, but leucistic. It has color in its beak, feet, and eyes, but has reduced pigmentation in its feathers. That's very cool. Hey, Joe? That'd be nice if it fluttered down to Vancouver so we could see it too.
I welcome. Yeah, come on down to the South Coast. You know, I just assume, Leanne, that all crows are true overlords, but that, you know, I think that one was a little ominous, though, if it was trying to steal my sandwich, which they often do, I have to say.
It's like the white raven in like Game of Thrones or something.
Yes, it needs, I'm sure it has 3 eyes and a long lineage. Yeah.
There we go.
All right, let's get you to your forecast as we get into the second half of the week. Starting off with current temperatures, it's still muggy out there. 20 right now at YVR, 23 in Osoyoos. So temperatures about a degree or two above seasonal. We will see them drop down to the high teens for Friday. So this is the last of the muggy air. And this is the cold front, already bringing showers to northern coastal sections, Haida Gwaii, Prince Rupert tonight. That will slide down to Metro Vancouver for Friday. Something that I'm watching the long range. I know it's been an extended summer. You might have heard some chatter about a typhoon changing our weather forecast. There's a few typhoons in the Pacific. One actually just made landfall in China and is moving towards Shanghai tonight. But this weakening typhoon will be tracking across the Pacific. Now, by no means are we getting any typhoon weather in the forecast, but what it'll do is initiate a wave in the jet stream. So we're finally going to get into some cooler weather as our high pressure ridge that has dominated for weeks sinks south. So this could be the start of fall weather. Take a look at the accumulated rainfall over the next 24 hours and you can see it's scattered, but a lot of the province getting some good rain. Unfortunately, not the soaking rain we need in the northeast for the Battleship Fire, but definitely a good 10 to 20 millimeters for parts of the coast. That little low is tracking off, and our cold front will be the new story. There it is showing up in our forecast. 17 for Friday, 17 for Sunday, and even as we dry out for early next week, Leanne, I'm saying it, I'm calling it sweater weather.
Oh, I'm ready.
Noise?
I'm ready.
Okay, good.
Stews and sweater weather, bring it on.
Done. It's official.
Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
The car business in North America is in the throes of a major shift. The move to electrification is charging ahead, and the use of gasoline and diesel is going to fade significantly. And this year, the North American International Auto Show in Detroit shows the industry is changing gears. Nisha Patel is there.
It's good to be back.
President Joe Biden toured the Detroit Auto Show promoting his administration's investments in EVs and a $900 million plan to build public charging stations across the U.S.
I'm pleased to announce we're approving funding for the first 35 states, including Michigan, to build their own electric charging infrastructure throughout their state.
Meanwhile, U.S. automakers here are also putting their EV plans into drive.
This is the 2023 Chrysler 300C.
Already one of the first big reveals, Chrysler brand CEO Chris Fillell says the company will roll out a limited edition of its Canadian-built 300 sedan before ending production next year.
Chrysler is going 100% battery electric by 2029.
It's a way to bid farewell to an iconic gas-powered car as more automakers move quickly to meet the era of electric vehicles. They say it's what consumers are looking for.
Electrification is certainly top of mind. People are concerned about fuel economy and fuel prices.
Many traditional automakers have scaled back their presence at the show, while some startups give a glimpse of the future. New players like PlugZen, which supplies charging infrastructure, and Harbinger Motors, which wants to electrify trucks like delivery vans.
Over the last year or so, the amount of my mail that is from people who think an EV could be relevant to them has changed so dramatically.
Canada's set a goal for all new vehicles sold to be zero emission by 2035. Consumers will get to test out at least some of them here at the auto show. Nisha Patel, CBC News, Detroit.
And how about turning your gas car into an electric vehicle? Turns out there are people who can make that happen. And as Nancy Russell reports, one company is very busy.
This is one of two prototypes of the new electric pickup truck. It started as an older model Toyota Corolla, the passenger seats replaced with a truck bed, the engine removed, replaced by electric batteries. These prototypes have been 2 years in the making, progress slowed by the pandemic and challenges in sourcing key supplies such as these electric batteries.
It's amazing because this phase is so important for our business, and now we are ready for the next step.
They are still tweaking the design. The vehicles will sell for $35,000 with a range of 150 kilometers, and there will also be a more expensive version that can travel farther. Upcycle is targeting companies with fleets of vehicles who can use a smaller pickup for short trips as an alternative to larger pickup trucks.
We have a lot of these small pickup trucks in Brazil. It's very common for us. But here in Canada, in North America in general, it's hard to find one. So we think there's a good niche of market for this kind of vehicle.
The company has received support from the federal and provincial governments and from UPEI's School of Sustainable Design Engineering. Students help with research on the vehicles, and 2 recent graduates now work here.
This means a lot to me because, we're taking cars that otherwise may go to a scrapyard and giving them brand new life. We're thinking it's going to almost double the lifespan of these cars.
The company says it hopes to create 12 jobs when the assembly line is up and running next year, and have already sold more than 20 electric vehicles of the 100 they will produce in 2023.
We have a small island and a small car company, so I think it's pretty nice.
If all goes well, Antonini says they hope to ramp up annual production from 100 to 200 vehicles in the next couple of years. Nancy Russell, CBC News, Stratford.
Under a mega drought, California food producers are changing things up. Why they're moving production north to Canada. That's next.
I have a veggie garden with the fruit pretty much in the middle of it.
Elaine McKegg's garden near Hudson Bay is ready for harvest, but it's not just tomatoes and carrots growing here. There are strawberries, plums, and even cantaloupe, 12 of them to be exact.
We have an oak tree in our front yard. I figured if an oak tree will grow here, what else can? And why not push the limits? Let's see what can grow.
Further south near Lumsden, Dean Kreitzer has been growing fruit on a larger scale for 23 years. He owns Over the Hill Orchards and Winery, and his crop includes everything from wine grapes to apples to figs.
I look at this as a laboratory, and in a laboratory you test things and you fail and you succeed. So that's kind of how I get through all the failures, and it's just learning how certain plants react to the Saskatchewan climate.
Fruit farming actually has a long history in Saskatchewan. Apples were first bred here in the 1920s, sour dwarf cherries in the 40s, and even a variety of plums were first bred by a farmer in eastern Saskatchewan in the 70s. And the industry has grown quickly, with just 8 hectares of commercial fruit development in 1980 to 900 hectares and 250 growers today. And our warming planet could further increase production. Bob Boers studies fruit at the University of Saskatchewan. He says while warmer weather could bring more diverse crops and a longer growing season, it's hard on plants that are built to withstand the cold.
The other issue is whether we get new diseases and pests, right? Because our winters kill a lot of the insects that want to live here, or get them off to a slow start.
Climate change may already be having an impact. As the planet has warmed over the years, plant hardiness zones have shifted. The higher the zone number, the warmer the temperatures are. And the biggest changes have been in Western Canada.
In Regina, 50 years ago, the hardiness zone rating was a 2A, whereas when we updated our maps about 10 years ago, that rating had changed to a 3B.
An updated map is expected within the next year.
Next, we have our row of rhubarb.
Elaine McKegg plans to keep pushing the botany boundaries in her garden. She's going to try to grow honeydew next year. Ethan Williams, CBC News, Regina.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
Celebrate UBC's homecoming weekend with CBC's Ian Hannamansing at Think Forward, a discussion with UBC's leading thinkers on September 24th. Learn more and register at homecoming.ubc.ca. And support Indigenous art with CBC Vancouver's Angela Starrett at Ravens Feast, a gala and art auction at the Bill Reid Gallery. Get tickets at billreidgallery.ca.
As temperatures soar in California, 97% of the state is under severe drought conditions. As Nisha Patel explains, it's raising concern for crops there, but may offer opportunities for Canadian farmers.
Fruit grower Sebastien Dugray is branching out, producing blackberries and raspberries, an unusual move in this part of Canada.
There's definitely a learning curve, okay? Last year was rough. This year is way better. We've got better fruit.
He's teamed up with American berry giant Driscoll's, a test run to see whether commercial production in Quebec is viable, though the colder climate normally limits berries.
There's big companies interested in doing business in Canada. To me, that's a good opportunity.
Using infrastructure like these tunnels, Dugray can protect the plants, extending the growing season. Much of it is trial and error, which he may not have considered if he had to go it alone.
Companies like Driscoll's that have a little bit more capital might be able to take those risks.
Driscoll's and another U.S. fruit seller, Nature Ripe, are looking north, as climate change fuels the chances of extreme weather that can devastate crops. In California, droughts, water shortages, as well as labor issues make growing in Canada look more attractive.
By using technology, by using the latest genetics, that we can actually have a viable season in Canada.
È davvero stupenda. Guardate questi rami.
As the world warms, farmers across the globe are redrawing the agricultural map. Italy is experimenting growing coffee for the first time, despite a location way above the equator. Meanwhile, in Peru, it's estimated the nation could lose half its suitable areas for avocado just a few decades from now.
When you have disruptions in one place, you need to have another place that can hopefully mitigate some of the consequences in the marketplace.
Extreme weather events have also taken a toll here at home, and growers like Dugray know they need to adapt to survive.
It's a never-ending process, adjusting every year, and in 30 years from now, we'll still be adjusting.
While it's still unclear if Canada could ever be a serious competitor in the berry market, these growers have hope their efforts will bear fruit. Nisha Patel, CBC News, Toronto.
Very interesting story. I know growers here, farmers here have certainly felt the impact of climate change in the Okanagan. All right, that does it for us tonight. Thank you for being with us on CBC News Vancouver at 6 o'clock. As always, check us out on CBC Gem if you haven't downloaded that yet. That is our free app. And in the late host chair tonight, Michelle Gassoub will be there. I'll be back here tomorrow. Have a good night.